Hello, namaste, kamagani. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to see all of your smiling faces in the audience. I have the privilege today of sharing the stage with two fantastic writers, Ria Chopra and Sumanto Chattopadhyay. Ria has written a book called Never Logged Out, which is phenomenal, and equally phenomenal is Sumanto's book, Stories of Words and Phrases. This is the last day of JLF. How are we finding it? And so, you know, it's absolutely wonderful to be here on the last day and to be speaking about words. This event is called Words Are All We Have. And so let's kick it off with some words, shall we? I think we should start with some readings. Ria, would you like to give us a little passage from your book, Never Logged Out?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. It's the last day of JLF, and for 4 days, we've been looking at authors and listening to authors talk about how much they love writing their books and how fun it is, blah, blah, blah. So I thought I would read a little about how tough it was for me to write my book, because I think it's important to have that conversation as well. So I'm going to read a passage from my last chapter, which talks about representations of the internet. I also chose this passage because serendipitously, Words Are All We Have, which is the title of our program here today, also appears as a line in this passage that I'm about to read. There are many impediments to writing a book about the internet. The first is that the exercise is essentially bound to remain incomplete. We can never paint a full portrait of what the internet has done to our generation, because the doing is ongoing. It is making of us as we make of it. The second, which I also talk about more in my book, is that this isn't a ledger with a clean bottom line. Confronting the effects of the internet means looking at a mirror and seeing all the selves we have ever been, many of which are embarrassing, cringy, and downright painful to relive. Nothing short of an autopsy of the self. The third is a more logistical issue. I have written for several years now about the internet, but always on the internet, on digital magazines and platforms that encourage the examination of the medium in the message. When I started writing about internet culture at 21 years old, few people my age were writing about it. In fact, one of the central reasons I started writing at all was out of sheer spite. I could not stand another condescending essay by a 35-year-old about how the teens of today were subsumed into avocado toast and hookup culture. Over the years, it has been gratifying to see more young people share their lived realities, insights, and opinions about being online. Digital platforms are built to support writing about digital experiences. One can hyperlink a niche internet reference to its detailed explanation, embed a tweet, hyperlink a reel to support a claim, and even edit post-publishing in light of new facts, developments, and research related to the subject matter. Trying to represent the internet in a non-digital medium, as I'm learning in the process of writing this book, is like trying to explain the Iliad while possessing the vocabulary of a toddler. All I have are words and Chicago-style endnotes that barely a fraction of you will read. The attempt to portray something as dynamic as the internet in a static medium is a quandary in itself. And fourth, and perhaps the largest of these problems, is the fact that every person has their own history with the internet. Our cursor clicks have formed a unique Morse code that only we can ever fully grasp. Since our experience online is shaped by the same intersections of geography, location, class, caste, religion, gender, and other socio-political categories that define the rest of our lived realities offline, it is not possible for one person's work to portray the entirety of a generation's internet. There are infinite possibilities to be portrayed. I knew these impediments would come even when I had just started writing this book. I decided to do it anyway.
Hi, everyone. My book has 80 words and phrases, and I talk about their origin stories. So the one that I've picked for this reading is chapter 8, which is on the limerick. Are you guys familiar with what a limerick is? Yeah, it's a witty verse in 5 lines, essentially. So let me read. Edward Lear is called the father of the limerick because he popularized this form of poetry. Here's a limerick he wrote. There was a young lady whose chin resembled the point of a pin. So she had it made sharp and purchased a harp and played several tunes with her chin. So imagine a lady with a pointy chin playing the harp. Hilarious nonsense, isn't it? No wonder Lear called his book of such poems a book of nonsense. Published in 1846, this book earned him £125, a princely sum for a writer in those days. We don't earn that much more today. Published in 1846, this book, Since then, a lot of limericks written by various people start with the words, there was a young lady, ... Often the words that follow are quite bawdy, so I'm not going to share them here. The term limerick is thought to come from the name of the place called Limerick in Ireland. It seems that limericks were a popular form of drinking song in England and Ireland. Poets used to spar in verse at an Irish pub in Croom in County Limerick. Here is a repartee between the poets Sean O'Twama and Andy McGrath. O'Twama, who was a pub owner, boasted, I sell the best brandy and sherry to make all my customers merry, but at times their finances run short as it chances, and then I feel very sad, very. So Andy McGrath, who's a customer at that pub, this is his rejoinder. O'Twama, you boast yourself handy at selling good ale and bright brandy, but the fact is your liquor makes everyone sicker. I tell you this, I, your friend Andy. The verse form of the limerick is an old one. Some say it goes back to France in the Middle Ages, but it was Edward Lear who popularized the form with his 1846 book, making him synonymous with limericks. So much so that such verses started being called lyrics, till the word limerick appeared at the end of the 19th century. I think Lear's works justify his reputation as the father of the limerick. As a tribute to him, I have written the following limerick. There was a young writer called Lear, whose poetry spread far and near. He made people giggle so much that they'd wriggle and fall down and bruise their rear. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both for sharing. As you were speaking, about bringing sense to nonsense, this idea that, you bring sense to a nonsense in a limerick, you kind of revel in the nonsense. And that chimed with something that Ria wrote as well, I think, in that, the internet is a place of multifarious opinions, all kind of conflicting and contrasting and can seem nonsensical at times. And Ria, I feel, and maybe you can speak to this, that your book reflects that form of the internet. And how did you bring sense to the nonsense in the novel, in your book? Because the digital medium is obviously very different to the book.
I think a challenge that came even before I started writing the book is that the target audience for a book like this is people who are extremely online. And by default, the assumption is that people who are extremely online don't have the attention span to read books. How then do you write a book that is specifically for those people? And I took it as a fun personal challenge to have my book almost sound like the internet in how it is in form. So there's bursts of information that are like the reels we constantly keep scrolling through. There are sections that go on and on and on about specific ways. I wanted people who read this to feel like they're scrolling. But of course, the internet is a multimedia platform, right? So there were parts when I wished I could just put a meme instead of having to write 3 paragraphs explaining what that meme was or where it came from. And that was a fun problem to grasp with, because words are all that we have when it comes to a book. It was an exercise that I think imperfectly I have still tried to do. The more writing that comes, that is on the internet, I feel like it's an ongoing process, and the internet is its own geography, so how we bring onlineness into our writing is an interesting problem for writers of this generation. I've read and watched discussions of people talk about how do you bring Indianness into your writing, or how do you bring womanhood into your writing. I feel like onlineness is also one of those identities that now are being translated into language. This is my attempt to do it. It was extremely fun for me, if I can be honest. It was a word problem, like a puzzle of sorts. How do I write a book that an extremely online person would enjoy reading. And I think people are liking it, so I hope I've done that as much as I could. That's, yeah.
I think you've succeeded. And you mentioned, how do I bring Indianness to the book? And Sumanto, this might be a nice segue into your book. And it's interesting, Ria's book is written in 8 long-form chapters, and Sumanto, yours is 80
short chapters.
Short chapters, yes. So 80 is a very important number. But
Yeah.
within these short chapters, you discuss the English language, and you have a social media channel called The English Nut, which, side note, is how my friends describe me. And within these chapters, you discuss that, maybe this thing we call the English language has more origins in Indian terminology.
Right. So, I think we all know that there are certain Indian, we all know that the word avatar, all of us sitting here know that that's from avatar. So some of them are obvious, but some of the words that originated in India took a completely different form by the time it reached English. So let me talk about one of them. Do you know where the word chess in English comes from? Well, it comes from India, since that's the topic. And it comes from an ancient game called the Chaturanga, which was basically a battle simulation game based on the Indian epic Mahabharata. And Chaturanga, it also had chess. The only thing is it was not played on a checkered board, it was played on a plain white board, but it had a king, a raja, and a mantri, the minister. The mantri becomes a queen by the time it reaches Europe. But anyway, so from India, this went to Persia. In Persian books, there's a Persian classic called Shahnameh, which was written, I think, in the early 11th century by Firdaus. And that mentions how an Indian king brought chess or Chaturanga to Persia. And the Persians pronounced it as Chatrang. And they changed the Raja to, what's the Persian word for king? Shah. So they changed it to Shah. And we all know that those of you who play chess know that you say check when the king is in trouble. So the Persians introduced it, except they used to say Shah to warn the king. So Shah became check in English. And when the king was trapped and was about to die, it was checkmate, right? And checkmate, do you know what that comes from? It comes from Shahmat, which means the king is dead in Persian, and it's quite familiar to us as well. So Shahmat became checkmate, and Shah became check. And the French word, it actually went into French as the French word échec, and échec became chess in English. Another interesting thing that I want to talk about related to chess is that the soldier, the foot soldier in chess, do you know what it's called? It's called a pawn. So you know what word it comes from? The word pawn comes from the old French word paon. So what Hindi word is that similar to? Paon. It means foot, literally. So imagine Hindi in India and Old French in Europe have a word which is almost identical, because at the end of the day, all of these languages have a common root in Proto-Indo-European. So yeah, so there's paon, and even the word peon, which we use a lot in India, the peon at your office or the peon who delivers letter, peon also comes from the same word meaning foot. So yeah, and just one last thing, the Russian word for chess is shahmati, which directly comes from checkmate in Persian Urdu. Yeah, so I know I spoke a lot, but yeah. So this is just one of this word is in my book, and there are many other words which are of Indian origin in the English language. Yeah.
Sumanto, I feel obligated to ask you, what's your chess ELO?
What's my what?
you get a score when you play chess.
I don't play chess. See, I can only talk about its etymology, but don't ask me to play it. I can barely play chess.
Maybe we should add a chapter on the etymology of ELO, Because
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that comes
This is the first time I'm hearing it.
from. Maybe someone from the audience can tell us at the end.
Can I just, sorry, I want to jump in and say it's very interesting because I like etymology and I've watched your reels and I love the kind of content that you put out. And it's interesting how stories of words can be traced through history and how cultures traded with each other and sometimes words go here and there and all those things. On the internet, if you're trying to trace the etymology of a piece of slang or a meme, it becomes very hard because there's different languages being spoken on different platforms. And see, for us in India here, a lot of memes emerge on TikTok, which is banned here. So we don't have access to the space where it was created. For instance, it took me so long to understand where 6-7 comes from, right? And I had to eventually watch Palki Sharma explaining in a long YouTube video what it is, and now I know the sign and all of that. But did you know that we know specifically where soft launching of relationships is? It comes from tech, but in that specific relationship context, it was used by a comedian called Rachel Sennott on Twitter, and that's why we all call that kind of photo a soft launch. I feel like etymologies are harder on the internet. Tweets get deleted. We know Rachel Sennott tweeted that because her account is still up. A lot of people have deleted their Twitter accounts, and we don't know where that, we wouldn't know where that word comes from. Where does ghosting come from? Who first thought of calling ghosting? Who first called a situationship, right? My mother calls it affair chal raha hai unka, but like situationship, it's a very Indian way of saying it. But situationships is another one of those words. So I feel like internet etymologies and histories are so convoluted and so fragmented. It's interesting to me to place it in context of those words because work has been done on linguistics enough. Hopefully work is done on the internet enough that we have these clear cut ways of saying ki ye, this came from here and this came from there and this came from that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see this in both of you, this kind of dogged detective work that you've done. And so I'm just wondering, personally, where do you feel that investigative curiosity arose? Is there a particular point in your life where you feel, that came about? Open to both of you.
I mean, I got diagnosed much later, but I think sometimes when you're interested in these things, it can be a sign of neurodivergence at an early age. But I think for me, I got interested in quizzing as a hobby very early. My school used to encourage us to do quizzing, and very often in quizzing, you're trying to reverse engineer answers based on the question that is asked of you. And that is also investigation in some way. I like crossword puzzles. I like cryptic crossword puzzles. I had a family that encouraged that kind of pursuit. I love murder mystery books, which I think is also where it comes from. So it's very vast. But I think that all has added up to this instinct of just wanting to know more and wanting to click on as many links till my Google Chrome is like filled with tabs. And now I'm reading all of them and in different rabbit holes at the same time. So, yeah.
I forgot the question.
So where did it come from, this investigative spirit?
Where did this start? So for me, I think it started at a very young age. I was quite a precocious child. And I was always, my mother tongue is Bengali and I was learning English. And every time I would come across a word in English which was similar to a word in Bengali like mother and mata or ma and mum, I would go to my mom and say, why are these words similar? So, she would try to explain, and then eventually my parents just bought me a big fat dictionary and said, do your own research. So that's how I got started as a detective. And in fact, you mentioned earlier that one of your favorite authors is Agatha Christie, right? So I have a chapter on the phrase red herring. And I quote, or I don't quote, I talk about the murder on the Orient Express and what the red herring was over there. A red herring is basically a smelly smoked fish, which it is said that at one time to train hounds to follow a smell trail, they would drag this smelly fish across the trail to distract the hound and to make sure that the hound didn't follow it and followed the original smell. So in detective stories, it's when there's something which is actually, there's somebody who's the murderer, but you want to make the readers think that it's someone else. So in Murder on the Orient Express, The detective Hercule Poirot sees this woman in a kimono walking down the corridor of the train, and later on he finds that kimono inside his suitcase. But actually, at the end, you realize that this was just a distraction. It was a red herring, because this woman in the kimono had nothing to do with the murder.
So, without revealing any red herrings, could you maybe give us a bit about your journey to publication, both of you? How, what were the trials, tribulations?
Yeah, I've been writing since I learned how to write, but in the space of freelance journalism and freelance writing, which is what I was doing before the book, I started around 2020 because it was the lockdown and I had too much time on my hands and I love to write. So I thought, why not get published? I interned at some news media publications, so I sort of knew how they worked. Like I knew the process of pitching an editor. So I started getting published in a bunch of magazines, newspapers. I think people liked my writing because having an insistent young person be very strong about their opinions is something that just people like to see and then talk about and then sometimes aggrandize about as well. But that was interesting, and some of my writing took off online because I was writing about the internet at a time when not a lot of people were, specifically the Indian internet. And the more that took off, the more attention came to my writing. And one day my editor, Chirag, who's the one who eventually edited my work, he works at Bloomsbury, I was interviewing him for an essay that went viral online. It was for Vice India, a website that does not exist anymore at all, but I enjoyed writing for them. And he liked my process of asking questions and then writing and getting to the root of things. So then he asked if I would want to write a full book about the internet instead of just doing short essays and articles. And I had a proposal that a couple of publishing houses had rejected because they thought it was too early to write about the Gen Z internet. We're still so young, and I was having a hard time convincing them that young people can feel things and it's important to write about us. But thankfully, Chirag saw something in my proposal, and it took a year and a half and around 2 years roughly to get out there. But we're there now. This is the end of 2 years, and I can see my book and people can read it. It's been a long journey, I think, but I've enjoyed it.
My journey was a little unusual because most of the writers I've talked to first wrote the book and then approached a publisher. In my case, because I have the social media platform called The English Nut, on which I was creating videos about etymology, the publisher Rupa saw that, and I actually got a message in my inbox now quite a few years ago saying, would you write a book? And that's how the book happened. And for me, I approached writing the book as, I do episodes. I would write episodes for each etymology. So when I was writing the book, it was like writing each chapter for me was like writing an episode of the English Nut. So yeah, except of course it's the research is more rigorous when it's in book form. And the other thing I want to say is that after I submitted my manuscript, which was 3 years ago, while the publisher was hurrying me up to send it, when I sent it, they sat on it for 2.5 years. And every time I ask them, when are you going to publish? They say, but we have manuscripts lying with us from before COVID. And I heard this so many times. I finally told them this year, either publish it now, this year, or please let me go to another publisher. And that's when my book got published.
Checkmate.
Shahmat.
So we've spoken, well, all of us are heavily involved in social media, actually. The English Nut, Ria Chops. I have a social media account where I post writing lessons. And I just wonder, how do you feel this has affected language? And maybe we can also speak about the algorithms involved in there and AI, the influence of AI on our internet culture.
Okay. I'll talk about the latter part, which is AI. Yeah. So, the Cambridge Dictionary's word of the year for 2025 is parasocial. I don't know if you guys know what parasocial means. So parasocial is a word that was coined by American sociologists in the 50s, and it was when television was big and people would sort of crush or get totally involved in the lives of a particular character. And it was they would feel this deep emotional connection, but except it was completely one way, because those actors or those characters obviously don't know that you even exist. So, and this became even stronger, like in India with the advent of social media, all the Bollywood stars and have social media accounts, and people kind of, whatever, they keep writing comments, and they actually think that they're talking to their star, but those people have no idea about it. But what is what has changed now with parasocial has also come to include a one-way emotional relationship that you have with an AI. So I can tell you about my case. I've started using ChatGPT a lot for research, and it often lies, right? And then when you point out, because I double check everything, when I point it out, it'll say something like "good catch," and if that AI was sitting in front of me, I would give it, as we say in India, one tight slap. But I can't. So I keep saying you lied, and then it comes up with these elaborate, excuses, and I said, face it, you lied. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm probably wasting, a lot of resources doing this. And eventually, ChatGPT will say, I'm really sorry on a personal note. I know you're dependent on, but so this is this is a very toxic parasocial relationship.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on AI are twofold. One, broadly, I feel like we're so quickly resigning over so many of our faculties to a tech that we don't even fully understand yet, right? Like people are using it. I see the appeal, and I do myself often also use it for research. But then this thing of double checking is not something a lot of people are doing. So you accept what is told to you, and then that yields problems in your life. And the more AI thinks for you, the more AI becomes your therapist or your intern, your logistical partner. You are in some way delegating that responsibility to it. So your muscles for doing that yourself are probably getting atrophied at some level, right? So when there is no AI, at some point of time, you're somewhere without your phone. What do you do? How do you operate? And I feel like the new generation of children that are growing up with AI will probably have to contend with that. Specifically because of writing my book, I now know that a lot of very non-consensual changes happen to you when you embrace technology as much as we did with the internet, right? So we've seen it happen once, we've seen it happen multiple times, in fact, previously also. Why are we letting kids do it again? There is no age regulation on AI. Schools have no age regulation. There's no sensitization. No one talks about it. I feel like that's a huge gap. The second thing, specifically in the creative space, I feel like AI as a co-creator has become a very political discussion to have, because sure, AI democratizes creation quite a lot. Like someone who doesn't have the money or the tools or even the privilege to have a degree in the arts can now use AI as a co-creator. But I feel that, and for those of us who do make things ourselves, know that it's not the end product that makes you. It's not my book that makes me a writer. Like I can hold this and say that I wrote this. But being a writer is the 2 years that it took me to write that, and the changes, like my life has changed because of the book, right? My perspective has changed because of the book. I feel like once AI takes the process away from you, all you have is an object with your name on it, and you're trying to say it's yours, but it did nothing to you. And that's, we need more people to think about that aspect of things as well. Coming to the first thing, social media, which I quite enjoy thinking about. I've been seeing a lot of authors in the Speakers Lounge also cribbing about how all authors have to be influencers nowadays, and oh, they're making me make reels, but I'm a writer, how can I make reels? And I feel there is merit to that discussion, and I'm not dismissing it outright. But the reading audience in all spaces is very less, right? Publishing is a loss-making business. No one's making money because people don't spend money on books. When the paying audience is less, and you have the opportunity to use a different medium to get your ideas out to people, to be able to build your own market, why would you not do that? Is your work not important enough for more people to read? Do you not believe that people who spend more time on their phones deserve to also hear what you have to say and read your book? So I think this almost denigrating sort of conversation of, oh, I now have to make you're getting to talk about your work. What's the problem? Is that not what all interviews are? So of course, there's the discussion about like, do I have to dance or do I have to put a song? And the algorithm might shadow ban me, specifically for people writing political books. And in India, it's not just shadow banning, right? It's institutional banning. But I think that comes later. The principled way in which people look down on social media, I feel like that's a problem. I'd outright say it's a bad thing. Why? It's a new audience. Go get them. That sort of thing.
I think it's something new, and with the unknown, there's fear, right? I remember watching an interview with David Bowie. He was speaking about the advent of the internet. Yeah. And this is where I got it from. Okay, and he says, well, maybe you want to describe it.
Yeah, he describes it as an alien life form. He says that, and this is in the 90s, I think, 80s, 90s, I think that is where the interview is from. I love how he talks about it because David Bowie is also the master of reinvention. Like, he made himself into Ziggy Stardust and all of that. Talks about it as an alien life form, and I mean, I have the exact quote if you want, but that really stuck with me because to have such a prescient way of looking at the internet is interesting.
While you find it, I'll turn it over to Sumanto. Sumanto, have you got a pet peeve with language, a most annoying phrase or term, or are you just very zen about it all?
Well, I just get really annoyed when people start, using a word in a. I mean, a few years ago, people were saying epic for everything. I think they didn't even know what the epic originally was. And nowadays, of course, there's a whole bunch of things like it's giving holiday vibes, or, like it's giving. So, yeah, so I do find these a bit annoying. But at the same time, I realize I don't dare say all this in front of her. But yeah, I mean, I know that language has to evolve, and it evolves through slang. In fact, I have a lot of older people who watch my stuff, and when I did a few videos on Gen Z slang or Gen Alpha slang, they're like, we're going to skip this one. This is rubbish. This is not language. And then I did a video in which I talked about the fact that every generation has their slang. And while most of it just disappears when the generation grows older, there's always one or two words that stick. The word that we use for employment today in a very formal setting, job, comes from the English word jobbery, which was about some very shady kind of work that a crooked person might be doing. And that today describes the formal work that we all do. So yes, today's slang, some of it will be, delulu probably is not going to survive for long, or maybe it will, I don't know. But, maybe something like sus will, or riz will, I don't know. Yeah.
I think a lot of sus jobbery happens on the internet.
This is the Bowie. He says the potential of what the internet is going to do to society, both good and bad, is unimaginable. And then I fangirl about him a little bit. But then he says we're on the cusp of something exhilarating and terrifying. It's like an alien life form. So he pretty much saw it not just as a tool, but a sentient being in and of itself, which I think the internet has now become, right? It is thinking for itself in some way, and big tech companies are making it think a certain way. But when you're there, then you have to in some way adhere to the laws of the online space, which can be a little different from the laws of the offline world. Like rage bait, for instance, sells a lot more, right? The angrier things you post, the more extreme an opinion you have, you're bound to get more traction on it because people either agree or disagree with it, but whatever they do, it makes them feel strong feelings. So a lot of the internet is very, very angry. The problem is a lot of AI is being trained on the internet. Does that mean the AI is going to be angry? Is it going to rage bait? I feel like these are all very interesting questions that, unlike David Bowie, we have, like, a lot of us have no idea about where it's going to go. And it's just important to keep having conversations about it, right? Check base with each other, see where we're at, see what different people at different ages have to say, and from different jobs. So like artists also, for instance, have their own opinion about the internet, writers, business people, creators, influencers, children. Important to include everyone in the ambit of the conversation.
I think so. And, I think book festivals are wonderful places to have these discussions, because people here might have, various different opinions on AI and social media and what it's doing to attention spans. But I think the more open we are in the conversations we have about it, that's where progress is. And speaking of progress, I'm interested in hearing about your next books. If these are on the menu, would you like to?
I was just with some journalists before this, and they were asking me what I'm reading these days, and I gave them a list. And then the guy asked, "What about your next?" So then I told him the next book I was going to read, and then it turned out he was asking about my next book, which is to say I've absolutely not thought about it. Like, this is my first book. It took a lot out of me. It was like an exorcism, right? Like, it's gone now. I have nothing inside of me left to give, but I like spaces like this because I get to interact with a lot of creative people, and I'm hoping the more artsy spaces I get to be a part of, like, there will be a spark, an idea that ignites somewhere. But I could write, it could be anything, the next book. I have no idea, I'm waiting for it to come to me.
So when I wrote this book and I submitted the manuscript, it was 120,000 words long, and the publisher told me you have to cut it down in half. So I literally chopped out half the chapters in the book. So I actually have the sequel to this book ready. anytime the publisher asks me, I have it ready. Other than that, I would also do, see, my book is it's not India specific, but I would also love to do work on a book which is more to do with Indian English, because I think there are a lot of interesting aspects to that. And speaking of which, something that we use in English in India all the time, which is very relevant to this city, which is not used outside India, but what a prosthetic leg in India is called a Jaipur foot, because organization in Jaipur famously, they make prosthetic limbs at a low cost, especially for underprivileged people, who are financially needy. They can't afford a very fancy one. So people from all over India, in fact, even from places as far as Africa, come to Jaipur to get themselves fitted with a Jaipur foot. Yeah, so that's a word from here. So and we all know that we use this word prepone in India as the opposite of postpone, which is only used in India and nowhere else. So so it would be really fun to do a book on that, perhaps.
Prepone actually came up in an email with me recently, and I had to go Google it. It is. I'm going to bring it back to the UK. But yeah, so we'll come to audience questions in a moment, but I'll just finish with this one. If you were on a desert island with no internet, no social media, what book would you bring with you?
I think the loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, because I've been reading it for like 3 months now, and it's just not getting over. So I think by the time I finish it, I would be rescued, and I'd be off the island, and have my internet back. But that's just a joke. I'm enjoying the process of reading that book. My actual choice would be Shreyana Bhattacharya's Desperately Seeking Shahrukh, which is a non-fiction book that uses Shah Rukh Khan, the actor, as a statistical tool to look at the lives of women in India, women belonging to different economic classes, backgrounds, work spaces, etc. I think every time I read that book, I learn something new, like a different part of the text attracts my attention. And it's non-fiction, so it's also a lot to absorb. So every time it makes me think a different thing. So I think that would be a good book on an island.
Would you say the title again for the audience?
Sorry?
Would you say the title once more?
Yeah, it's called Desperately Seeking Shahrukh. It's by Shreyana Bhattacharya. It came out 3-4 years back. It's constantly #1 on Amazon because it's a damn good book. So please read it if you haven't already.
As a person who writes about etymology, I think it would have to be a work of Shakespeare, because so much in the English language comes from Shakespeare. I would probably pick Othello, because there are at least 3 phrases in my book which are from Othello. I don't know if all of you have read Othello, but Othello was a Moorish general of Venice, and one of the people who worked for him, Iago, wanted to become his chief lieutenant, but what happened was he was passed up, and somebody else got called, Cassio was given this job. So he wanted to take revenge. He wanted to destroy Othello. So he decides to concoct this story of where he makes it seem as if Othello's wife Desdemona is having an affair with Cassio. So, and the thing is that he's such a deliciously evil character, Iago, because on the one hand, he says, he tells Othello, "Beware, my lord, of jealousy, the green-eyed monster, which doth mock the meat it feeds on." And he's actually mocking Othello because, and so this phrase, we talk about green-eyed jealousy, or the green-eyed monster of jealousy, it comes from here. And on the one hand, he is manufacturing this jealousy, and he's warning Othello about it. Another one is when he's planning how he's going to do it, he says that, he's basically going to put on this act of honesty and loyalty. So he says, "I will wear my heart upon my sleeve for doors to peck at." So wearing your heart on your sleeve, that is being vulnerable and showing all your emotions, comes also from this play. And it doesn't come from this play, but it's one of the earliest mentions of this phrase. And the third one is that when Iago succeeds and Othello starts really becoming suspicious and jealous, he says, "If that the earth could teem with woman's tears, each drop she falls would be a crocodile," which is all about crocodile tears. So I think that I would get so much as a student of etymology from this book, and that's why I take it to a desert island.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So we've got about 5 minutes left. If there are any questions in the audience, yes, yeah. I'll have one here. Yeah.
Hi, my question is to Sumanto. First of all, very impressed with the work that you are doing, and I genuinely feel it's the need of the hour.
Could you speak a little loud?
Okay, I'm not audible. Am I audible now?
I can hear you, yeah.
So first of all, I wanted to congratulate you that I'm really impressed with the work that you're doing. And it's just a thought in my head, and I would like to know, has it ever crossed your mind, any thought that perhaps tracing back to the history, a word which was very popular, right, and perhaps bringing it back into the current usage, or perhaps inventing a word which has a very intellectual meaning and might suit the modern usage? Have you ever given a thought to that?
No, because it's a great idea, but I don't know if I'm up to the task, because inventing a word and then making it popular is a tough thing. But there is an example, the word quiz. It is said that there was this guy who said, "I'm going to make." He took up a challenge to make a word popular overnight, and I think this was in Ireland, if I'm not wrong. And he plastered the walls with the word quiz overnight, and then the whole city was talking about it. And that's one theory about how that word came about. But it's a tough thing to do. But maybe using social media, you might consider doing something like this. You're the expert.
I've actually tried to, there are things that happen online that just haven't happened before, right? Like for instance, the process of breaking down of our attention spans over time is a new thing. So there's no word for it yet. We have to keep saying attention spans are reducing, which is like 5-6 words. So I've called that attention depreciation in my book, because if the attention economy is an economy, as it is said, then the financial value of our attention reduces by value of it being so fragmented and being so, like, that's one word I'm trying to make it happen. So I think everyone should go and start using attention depreciation in conversations. Please, it would mean the word. Imagine if I become the inventor of it. And like you spoke about Othello one day, someone
and
like,
then I'll write about you.
Book. Yeah, let's go. That would be fun, I think. That's attention depreciation. Keep that in mind.
Lovely. Another question? Yes.
I was kind of hoping I don't get picked because I have so many. But I'm going to ask you the most unhinged one, because I think this is the right panel for it. If you go back a few decades, actually, not few centuries, but then automatic writing was something that authors were really exploring, and a lot of new kinds of writing and new kinds of words came out of this idea of, oh, I have given away the agency of writing to a ghost and I am just making use of. Would you call AI the new automatic writing? And what do you think would emerge from that?
Are you asking me?
Both. I mean,
Okay.
I'd love to hear from all of you.
I've read a couple of books that have come out in the last 2 years that have been co-written with AI. Vauhini Vara has an interesting book out called Searches, something about selfhood in the digital age, where she has AI co-write with her. I think it had a moment, but because all of us have now also started talking about how all AI writing sounds the same, like the M dash and that certain kind of phrasing, I feel like it's not creative, even if it is being written by the other. I feel like if it were good, there would be room to have artistic conversation about it. I think all of it is so same. It's like one person has then written all of these things, right? So it's not our different ghosts and everyone has one that's writing for them. It's that one machine doing everything. It's not interesting or exciting to me personally. I'm sure other readers.
So, strangely enough, my background is as a copywriter in advertising. So from early on, I used M dashes. But today one is told if I use M dashes and I remove them because people will think that I used AI to write it.
Yeah, so as a creative writing teacher, I use automatic writing myself, and so it's a really curious thing that happens there, and I think there's something to do with processing the unconscious, and it's the question of does AI have an unconscious, but that's a massive conversation, and I would like to welcome one more question, hopefully a quick, snappy one. Yep.
As you have said that a lot of words are being adapted from different languages into the mainstream language practices on the internet, that is English. So do you think that as the communities are becoming more and more interlinked with each other, that we might have a unified language in the future like we had the Proto-Indo-European language in the past, that a language which is used by all, which has encompassed all of the words of constituent past languages,
Thank you. Yep,
a cycle
yep.
repeating itself.
Right. So, I think that in a sense, English has become the link language of the world. But what I feel is that with the advances in technology, it's going to be more and more of people using their own languages because you will have there was something called a Babel fish in a very famous book where you put it in your mouth and you could be understood, or you could speak any language. You put it in your ear, yeah. So you could understand any language. So today, I think that technology is already becoming available that, she and I can be having a conversation in 2 different languages, but in our ear, we will hear the translated version. So, yeah.
I also just want to add to that. I feel like the incoming of a universal language also means the extinction or the lack of use of many others, which is not a very beautiful thing for me to think of. So I'd prefer actually if that didn't happen. Like you said, I think English has sort of become that due to like colonization and stuff like that. But sorry for gesturing to you, like I just tend to do that when that happens. But I think it's useful. I also don't see, we have Google Translate, AI is being used to preserve many languages. So I feel that it's like Pandora's box, right? It doesn't go back inside, which is good enough. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that's a good note to end on. And I would like to thank you all for participating in this conversation. And let's offer a warm round of applause to our authors.